welcome to video 2 in chapter 2.2 supply. So in the first video we covered the first 4 learning objectives. We looked at the law of supply and how supply curves are constructed. In this video we're going to look at the non-price determinants of supply, specifically reasons that we get a shift in the supply curve. So a quick reminder, in the first video we constructed some supply curves. So we saw that supply curves are upward sloping, and that was because as the price increases, then the quantity supply increases because businesses are incentivized to produce more of the product because the price has gone up and it's more profitable. So we can see that businesses produce more, as you can see here, and the change is because of a change in price. So what about if the whole curve shifts? So what we're going to look in this video is what happens and why the whole curve shifts. And the main thing here is it's not because of price. Because price is on the y-axis, then if there's an increase in price, then we're just going to move up and down along this curve, as we can see from the supply schedule as well. So just to put that into context and give you an example, we could look at a shift in the whole supply curve. So over here, we've got the previous data here with the price and quantity supplied, and then I've added another column with a new quantity supplied. So for example, if we look at a price of $30, previously the quantity supplied was 20 million. And now for some reason, the new quantity supplied is 30 million. And you can see that this increase in quantity supplied is not because of the price, because the price hasn't changed. And you can therefore see at every single price, the quantity supplied has increased. And that will then lead to an increase in the supply curve. So if we plot the price of the shoes with the new quantity supplied, you'll see that now we have this pink supply curve. We've got an increase in supply because the supply curve has shifted rightwards to a higher quantity. And this is not caused by a change in price. So what are the reasons for this? Why would the supply curve shift either to the right or to the left? Well, we're going to look at 6 reasons. I'm actually going to break this down into 8 reasons, and we'll go through these in order. I think these are more tricky than demand. I think demand's a bit easier because we're all consumers. We can kind of understand intuitively what's going to happen to demand. I think these are a bit trickier, so I'm going to go through these a little bit slower this time. So the first one's going to be changes in costs of factors of production. So if you remember from 1.1, the factors of production are these resources that we use to produce goods and services, and they're scarce and we have to make decisions about how we're going to use them. We saw that they were land, labour, capital, entrepreneurship. I also call this input costs. So when I learned economics, I learned this factor as a change in input costs. What this is basically, it's costs of factors of production. Inputs are the resources used to produce goods and services. So as the cost of factors of production, FOP, decreases, or input cost decreases, it's the same thing. What's going to happen is it's going to become more profitable to produce the good or service. So the reason for that is, let's assume we're selling for the same price. If the costs of factors of production go down, then for every item that the business sells, they're going to make more profit because the costs have gone down, and the profit per unit is going to be the price minus the input costs. So therefore, supply increases as businesses are going to be incentivized to produce more of it. And what that means is they're going to switch resources to production of this good or service. So if I give you an example, this hopefully makes more sense. So let's say the price of cotton decreases, then we're going to say that the supply of cotton t-shirts will increase. So we can see that cotton is a resource that we use to produce cotton t-shirts. So cotton t-shirt businesses are going to use cotton. So the price of cotton decreases, it's going to become more profitable to produce cotton t-shirts because it's cheaper for businesses to buy the cotton, and so therefore the supply is going to go up. So therefore, some businesses are going to decide to produce cotton t-shirts rather than something else. So let's say a business can produce cotton t-shirts or t-shirts using another input. They're going to be more incentivized to produce the cotton one because it's now much more profitable. The next factor is changes in technology. This is actually quite very similar, as we're going to see. So we're going to say an increase in technology leads to an increase in supply. So we're going to get a shift rightwards in that supply curve. And that is because technology increases the productivity of factors of production. So what that means is we're assuming here that the technology means that with the same factors of production, we can produce more. So this is what productivity is. How much can we produce from our factors of production? So therefore, if we can produce more products with the same factors of production because of the new technology, it's therefore going to be more profitable to produce it because we need less of the inputs to do it. And therefore, we've got the same argument up here. If it's more profitable to produce, we'll get an increase in supply. Then the third one I think is probably the easiest to understand. If there's more businesses, more firms in the market, then supply is going to go up. And hopefully that's quite intuitive. More firms enter the market, there's more companies producing the product, so therefore supply will increase. Moving on to indirect taxes and subsidies. So this is going to be covered in a later chapter, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. So taxes, you've probably heard this word before. This is when taxes are levied on goods and services. So what that means is that every time the product is produced and sold to consumers, a payment has to be made to the government. And so because this tax has to be paid on top of the cost of production, it's going to become more expensive to produce the product. So there's going to be an increase in the cost of production. So therefore, that means the tax will mean that the supply will decrease. Because the costs of production have gone up, it's going to become less profitable to produce it. So some businesses will stop producing this product and therefore go and produce something else instead. The subsidy is the opposite of a tax. So this is a payment to businesses for every unit of production that they produce. An example is electric vehicles at the moment. So every business that produces an electric vehicle and sells it to consumers will get a payment from the government. This therefore decreases the cost of production because the government's giving the business money, so therefore it's costing them less to actually produce it. And therefore, if we have a decrease in cost of production, it's more profitable, and therefore supply will increase. The example for the tax was the tax levied on cigarettes. This is all covered in 2.7 when we'll go through this in a lot more detail. The next factor is future price expectations, which was also one of the non-price determinants of demand. So if firms expect prices to rise in the future, so what's going to happen now? So as a business, if you think that prices will go up in the future, what's going to happen is that they're probably going to decrease current supply. So what they're producing at the moment, they might decide to hoard that. And therefore, they're going to wait for the price to go up, which is what they expect to happen. And when the price does go up, they're then going to supply their products to the market. And they're doing that in order to sell their products at the higher price. If firms expect prices to fall in the future, what they're going to do is increase the current supply so that they can sell their products at the current higher price before prices fall in the future. Moving on to the last two factors, which I think are the most difficult to understand. It took me a while to understand this when I studied economics all those years ago. So this is the price of related goods. This is the same as with the non-price determinants of demand. The prices of related goods were the prices of substitutes and complements. In the syllabus, they call them joint supply and competitive supply. So the first one is competitive supply. When I learned economics, I learned these as substitutes in production. So with demand, we've got substitutes and complements. We've got the same with supply, but the IB syllabus actually calls these different. So competitive supply is the same as substitutes in production, which is the term that I learned. The IB uses competitive supply, but they're exactly the same thing. And this is when a business has a choice between producing either of two goods. So, for example, a farmer could choose to plant either potatoes or carrots in a field. Obviously, the farmer has choices of other things like broccoli and peas and things like that. But in this situation, we're just going to use potatoes and carrots. So the price of carrots increases. What's going to happen is that the farmers are more likely to plant carrots and therefore less likely to plant potatoes. And so therefore, if the price of the carrots goes up, then the supply of potatoes will decrease. And that's the same with all products where we have some sort of substitutes in production or two goods have competitive supply. So there we go. Yeah, farmers will be incentivized to plant carrots rather than potatoes. So therefore the supply of potatoes will go down. Joint supply, I learnt as complements in production. And this is when two goods are produced at the same time through the same process, or rather where a business produces one good and another good is produced as well. So this is a lot less common. But let's say, for example, a sheep farmer has sheep on their field, and the sheep can produce both wool. So every year they'll cut the wool off the sheep and they can sell that. But also they can get sheep milk through the sheep as well. So let's say that the price of wool increases. Then if the price of wool increases, then the quantity supplied of wool will increase, which is just the law of supply. So what's going to happen is that the farmer is going to have more sheep, or maybe some dairy farmers who have cows are going to decide, well, let's have sheep instead of cows. And if we have more wool, then the supply of sheep milk will increase. So why is that? Well, let's go through this again. The price of wool goes up, so farmers are going to have more sheep. And if there's more sheep, then we're going to have a higher supply of sheep milk overall. So we've got these non-price determinants of supply. I like to learn these through acronyms. So with demand, we had Pepsi-C. If I use the ones in the syllabus, we get the letters CPI, FCN. I can't think of any words with that. So I learned the acronym Insect TJ. So basically, I've listed these out. So cost of factors of production is input costs. Then we've got tax, subsidies, expectation, technology, number of firms, joint supply, competitive supply. And you can remember those using Insect TJ, but there are lots of other alternatives out there. Whatever helps you remember is the best one for you. So there are some other non-price determinants. Those are the ones just in the syllabus. So weather's another one, especially with agricultural products. So a drought would mean there's a decrease in the supply of apples. If there's any type of bad weather, then the harvest for agricultural products is going to be worse, which is going to decrease supply. We're also going to get some seasonal changes in supply. So during the late summer and going into September, October is when the harvest for apples happens. So that at that time of the year, the supply of apples will go up. And other times of the year, there's going to be less supply, which is why the price of agricultural products will change during the year. So apples are best to buy during the late summer and autumn because there's lots of supply and the price will go down. But we'll do that in the next chapter. And then other things like laws. So, for example, tougher environmental laws means that businesses have to follow those laws, which might involve costs. And if there's a higher cost of production, then that might decrease supply for businesses that have to follow their laws. There are other ones out there as well. On to the last learning objective, which is a diagram showing movements along the supply curve versus shifts of the supply curve. We did this for demand. It's exactly the same, but we're just using supply curves this time. So to get movements along the supply curve, this is what we did in video 1, where we just move up and down the curve. So a movement along a supply curve is a movement from one point on the supply curve to another. So this point to this point. And this is caused by a change in price because this is what's on the y-axis. And this leads to a new quantity supplied. So for example, this is the same as earlier. The price increases from $20 to $30. The quantity supplied will increase from 15 million to 20 million. A shift in the supply curve, just move my head, is when the whole supply curve shifts inwards or outwards. And that's what we'll be doing throughout this video. And this is caused by one of the changes in the non-price determinants. So the ones we've done in the video today are technology, costs of factors of production, joint supply, competitive supply, etc., etc. All right, we've now finished video 2 in supply. Video 3 will be the HL only content down here. I'll see you next time.